competing values framework actually started in the mid-1970s by a man named Robert Quinn. And it started as a way of solving an ongoing academic argument. And the academic argument would go like this: what makes an effective leader? And then we try and trace the value that they created. And think about, at any given year, reading the Harvard Business Review, which is a magazine I love. But they'll have an article that says a great leader is somebody like Jack Welch. Closed fist, hard charging, sharp guy. And then the next article they'll say, no, a great leader is Mother Teresa, right? And it's building a community and a sense of mission. And the next article would say a great leader is Sam Walton and Walmart and the whole turnkey system at Walmart. And the next article will say, no, a great leader is Steve Jobs at Apple and just rethinking an entire industry and redesigning everything. Well, as academics, the question became, well, which is it? Is it this one or is it the other one? And we started to do research on this, or Quinn started to do research on this, and he had a very interesting discovery. And the discovery was that when you produce one type of value, you inevitably destroy another. And this is a very important concept because it says there's no such thing as the management book where you check everything off and everything's beautiful. It's sort of like what women went through in the 80s with the supermom. You can have it all. Well, not really. You have to make trade-offs. And the same is true for leaders. So Quinn's work was looking at how leaders who had one style of leadership could surround themselves with people who were different than they were and how those things would work. Well, then a guy came in named Kim Cameron, and he's one of the most famous scholars on the area of corporate culture, and he discovered that the same things kind of happened with culture. And then my work was saying that these same four forces for innovation, and I'll explain them in just a moment, happened in strategy and happened in innovation and change. And of course, then Anjan Thacker's work showed that this actually happened in economics. So the theory went like this. In a typing indicator, like a Myers-Briggs typing indicator or a DISC test, it's I'm this type and you're that type. I'm an ENTP, you're an INFJ, and here's how we interact. And I love these kinds of assessments. But there was a problem with it. And that was it didn't tell us anything about value creation. So what we did was we built our research in the opposite way. We started by saying, what do we know about the growth of companies? And there's a lot of research and a lot of things that we were actually able to look at how companies grow. Then we said, let's look at the culture and competencies of those companies and look at how that relates to how they grow. And we discovered that there was a direct correlation between how a company transformed itself, how it led itself, and how it grew. So the culture and competencies that you have will predict largely the outcomes that you get. It's sort of like a person. Your lifestyle will predict, your weight and kind of, your health factors, etc. Then we made the next step and we said, well, leadership should predict the kind of culture and competency that we have in the organization, which should then lead to particular types of value propositions or outcomes, meaning leaders would be optimized to create the perfect culture and competency to create the optimal outcome. And we discovered that that last piece was entirely untrue. That leaders did not create cultures and competencies that maximized value in the situation. They created cultures and competencies that looked like themselves. And they surrounded themselves with practices that looked like themselves. And so the biggest challenge in competing values, because this is kind of a unified field theory, the biggest challenge in competing values is this last link between leaders and the type of capabilities that they create in companies. Because remember, a leader's job is not to create value for themselves. A leader's job is to develop the ability for much larger groups of people to create value. So the competing values framework basically says three important things. It says that there are four forces, and that two of those forces at any given time are competing or displacing each other. These are often referred to as diffusion models. So let me give you an example. Have you ever noticed in an economy, when an economy becomes amazingly productive, like it is right now, we're having this recession and we're so productive right now, we're doing a lot more with less, have you noticed that growth rates go way down? And the reason they go down is because all the slack is taken out of the economy, all the variation, the experimentation which goes with innovation. The same thing will happen when we come out of this. We'll see a lot of variation like we did in, let's say, 96 or 97, and we'll see productivity numbers go down. So just like we see in economies, when something goes up, something else goes down. That's the first rule. The second thing that really created competing values, and it's a really important concept, is that we don't create in a vacuum. this whole concept of if I want this, the whole universe is going to do this for me, to me is an utterly, it's magical thinking. It's not grounded in reality. The reality is we're in a recession right now. You have to do things if you're an entrepreneur based on that. So part of what competing value says is it says look up to the situation. Pay close attention to how the situation is going to reward or going to punish the way in which you're trying to create value. So my favorite example of that is if you were a bull market trader at the end of September, one day came along when the bear showed up. And if you were still a bull market trader, you were out of luck, right? Because now the bear market traders were making money. The final part, and the most important part about this, is it says how you lead determines what you create. Or the way I put it in my field is how you innovate determines what you innovate. So the classic example is companies right now are looking for organic growth. And organic growth happens in what we call the Create Quadrant. The Create Quadrant is where you'd find Apple in the early days or Genentech or almost all of these wonderful Ben Franklin partner kind of companies that are being supported here that are doing biotechs and are doing all kinds of interesting energy sort of experimental technologies. So we would expect if we wanted organic growth that we would be coming to these people and saying, now is your hour to shine. But in fact, what we're doing is quite the opposite. What a lot of companies are doing is they say, I want organic growth, so we're going to build the organic growth system. We're going to be certified like black belts, and we're going to have the sensei and all the junior people, and there's going to be a turnkey way, and we're all going to go through it, and there's going to be a right way and a wrong way. And what the data tells us and what your own intuition tells you is not only is that not going to work, because what it's going to produce is it's going to produce quality and efficiency, which are the hallmarks of the opposite of the Create Quadrant, which is the Control Quadrant, sort of like Toyota or Walmart or McDonald's, right? It's going to create those incredible efficiencies which are good and noble and true, but it's going to inadvertently strangle the radical innovation that you seek. So how you innovate is what you innovate. So the three things, the competing quadrants, the levels in which you have to interrelate these, and finally, the methodology or the process in which you actually try and innovate and how that determines what you're going to get for it.